Well, hello all. Alright, back from shopping, food on the stove. We're just doing multitasking like you can't believe. But there is too much news out there not to get on the video as well. But let's start over at the Economic Summit, at what happened there. Well, let me show you. Okay, let's start out with the U.S. debt. It's $22 trillion. The new debt in the U.S. reflects a rise of more than $2 trillion from the day the Orange Man took office in 2017. In other words, he's responsible for a $2 trillion debt. Greta Thunberg and Ocasio-Cortez hit back at Mnuchin at the summit there, the Economic Summit. Let's look and see what Mnuchin said. So I thought it was quite well done that both of them ganged up on such a useless person, talking as if he knows everything about the economics, when his own country has a $22 trillion debt. I mean, the nerve of him to say a word about whether Greta knows anything about economics. Oh, and let's look at this chart and see how much carbon budget we have left before we have to keep our temperature below 1.5 C. We only have 8 years of time before we end up in real serious trouble. This chart sort of says it all. 8 years, and every year means that we have one less year, and that we have to even be more serious about cutting back each year that we delay. And there is so much to do. Greta's absolutely right. We don't have another minute to waste. But yet the Orange Man here in the U.S., he's finalizing the clean water rules. You won't believe what finalizing means. Let's go over and take a look, and you'll see why it's absolutely imperative that we get rid of him, one way or another. Legally, I'm talking about. Either in the election, or you vote him out of office right now in the Senate. The Senate has to do that. But it needs to be done, and this is why. There are huge, big losses in the clean water protection in the U.S. The Orange Man is going to gut safeguards for streams and wetlands in the U.S. Corporate polluters can now dump whatever sludge or slime into streams and wetlands. This includes golf courses. This will let polluters like golf courses to dump pesticides directly into many U.S. streams and wetlands. This will threaten the drinking waters of millions of people in the U.S. and also threaten animals. You have to remember, Orange Man, that when you throw stuff in a stream, it settles out on the bottom, and then it continues to go down into the sub-drinking water, into the water. That's how the water underground is fed. It seeps down. That means all the pollution that you're dumping in the stream is going down into the aquifers. U.S. EPA Chief Andrew Willer, a former coal lobbyist, touted the rule at the American Farm Bureau annual convention in Texas, U.S. this last Sunday. If you were to ever tote a tremendous nightmare for the entire world, but especially for the U.S., it's this rule right here. This is the worst thing you could do. This brings us back to before the 70s, when corporates were just dumping sludge, blood, and all that stuff right into the rivers and lakes and streams throughout the U.S. But when the EPA was invented, that stopped all that. But you got to remember, but back then there was half as many polluters as there is now. There's so much more in the way of pollution that's going to be dumped into our waterways, our drinking water, pesticides in our drinking water. But that's not only the worst thing, that the reason that we need to push this cleanup immediately, stop the pollution. I want to show you what's happening, and it's nightmarish. again. And it isn't to doom and gloom us. It's to show that we have to be on the ball, working on the fixes. Join Greta with the fixes, but let's look at what else is going on. So, deep sea divers see bubbling coming up from the seabed. It's a hot spot of CO2. It's 200 feet under the ocean. The location, the Philippines. There's so much CO2 coming up from the ocean, it has a new name called Soda Springs. Let's take a look at this nightmare that's happening. And in the Philippines, of all places, CO2 concentrations as high as 95,000 parts per million. Today's CO2 reading in the atmosphere was 414.07 parts per million. Let's take a look at the new chart showing the spikes that are happening in CO2. These are getting much bigger than they used to get, these spikes. Yesterday I saw a spike of 415.47 parts per million. My urgency is very much urgent. We must remove the orange man and all the right-wing leaders around the world. Get them out of office and put progressives in there. Or we're cooked, people. We are cooked so bad and so hard and so hot, you can't even imagine. Think of being in an oven at 350 or 250 and you can't escape anywhere. Do you really want to die like that? Roasting yourself? We're doing it. That CO2 level is skyrocketing. And we haven't even touched methane yet. I can't imagine. It's so important that we do something about replacing our leaders. Here in the U.S., Bernie Sanders is running, but the DNC, they don't want Bernie Sanders. They want some middle-of-the-road, semi-middle-of-the-road right-winger to take the place so that they can continue the ongoing slaughter of making money throughout the world, which is killing our planet. We must take money and use it only as a tool to get what you absolutely need. Greed kills the planet. The planet is quickly dying. Bernie Sanders, 2020. No under the bus.